So, welcome, Katie Reed, to the Road to Lit Fest. So, in case no one has been to any of the in-person sessions or the um, online sessions, we're getting everyone excited for the Tacoma Lit Fest, which is May 2nd from noon to 6 at the historic Tacoma Armory this spring. And we just want to get people excited about reading and writing all things books. We've got a lot of sessions that we're doing here every Wednesday, almost every Wednesday. Um, actually every Wednesday at 6:30 and almost every Thursday at 6:30. And today we are welcoming Katie Reed, who is a literary agent, and she happens, lucky for me, to be my literary agent. And she has been in the publishing industry for over a decade, if I have my numbers
Oh,
right.
it's been a while, yeah.
It's been a while. She's also not only just a literary agent, she's also a developmental editor. So for those people who are maybe not even necessarily ready for the agenting, but they're working on their books and they want to get that keen eye on their manuscript and their project. She was previously with Andrea Hurst and Associates, and now she, just last year, last fall, she founded her own literary agency, Katie Reed Literary, and I believe it was October or November of 2025.
October.
Yeah. So it's really exciting. Thank you for being here. And I'm a little laggy
A
and
little
it's
bit, but we can work with it.
okay because we have a big storm and I've tried to move
Mm.
right next to my computer, but or next to our it's not called a modem these days. I don't know what they're called these days. But anyway, she also presents, she leads conferences online, and she's just full of information. So she's going to answer some questions. I'm going to ask her some questions. You guys are welcome to ask some questions. And I suppose I first want to start with just sharing what a literary agent is and what they do for an author.
Sure. So, in order to get your book published with publishers, you have to have an agent in most cases. Some of the smaller independent presses, you can submit unagented manuscripts, but if your goal is to get into a traditional Big Five publisher, you're going to need an agent because the agents are kind of, it's almost like a stamp of approval. Like the agent has weeded through the piles and piles and piles of manuscripts and found those special projects that editors trust. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean your book is going to sell, but you have to have an agent to get it read, basically. It's kind of like a real estate agent in a sense, where the literary agent is the middle person in between the author and the publisher. And then after the sale, the agent sh should and does do a lot as well. So they make sure everything's running smoothly, step in if there's an issue or something happens. They can advocate for their clients. They look over contracts. So really, an agent is your best advocate for your career and your book.
So then most of us here are probably writers or we're thinking about writing. At what point should an author start thinking about getting an agent?
That's kind of a tough question. I think it really depends on where you're at in the writing process. If you're really new to writing, I wouldn't necessarily get too far ahead of yourself thinking about being agented. You need to concentrate on the book first, making the book as strong as it can be, making sure that your writing is competitive with what's out there on the shelf, and just like continuing to work on your craft. If you're at the stage where, you've been writing for a long time, or you feel like your craft is very strong, your story's strong, it's been through beta reads or developmental editors, that would be the point at which I suggest, you start researching to figure out which agents are going to be the best fit for you to pitch to. But again, like that's not really doable until you have a story. So I wouldn't do it too early because it might be distracting. from the writing process.
I remember talking to one of my friends who's an author and a publisher, and I was just so consumed with getting an agent. This was way back when. And he said, sit your butt in a chair and finish your book.
Yes, I think that's good advice.
So let's say I am done with my book and I'm ready to get an agent. What's the process? How does one even begin?
So you have to have a query letter. A query letter is basically our industry's way of reaching out to those agents to pitch them your book. It's a sales pitch for your book, and our industry has decided that this is how we're going to operate with a query letter. And so you'll want to have a very strong query letter. Queries are always about a page, and they should stick to industry standard format, which is hook, book, cook, meaning the first paragraph is going to be your hook paragraph and have like the meat and potatoes information. So like title, genre, word count, comps, maybe a log line in there somewhere, maybe some tropes or anything else that's going to like hook the agent right away. The middle of the query is going to be the book description. So think like back of the book or book jacket or description on Amazon. It's short, you keep it tight to the central conflict, and then a bio paragraph. And so once you have a strongly worded query letter, you're going to start researching. Most people use Query Tracker or Manuscript Wish List, and you'll want to research agents to find agents that are a great fit for your book and make a running list. And yeah, just start sending out your query.
So, and I know they have, you can look online, you can get some advice about how to write the best query process, but I like that you broke it down into here's your three chunks. You can go online and get examples too, which is helpful.
Yes.
Do you have any specific recommendations for the query in terms of maybe thinking common mistakes that writers make, misconceptions, things that absolutely should be done besides the structure that you just recommended?
Yes. So I think a lot of authors sometimes feel like they have to be like different. Like if they reinvent the wheel, it's going to make us notice them more, but it really does the opposite. It kind of makes you stick out. And we want the query to shine because of the story and not because you've done something unconventional with the query itself. So I would say number one, stick to industry standard format. If it's not broke, don't fix it. And then within that, you're trying to hook the agent into your story every step of the way, but make them want more. So you don't want to give away your whole plot. You don't want to give away the ending. I see authors do this a lot. They put too much of the plot in their query letter. You want to keep a very tight focus on the central conflict, the protagonist, what they want, and the stakes. What happens if they don't get what they want? I see a lot of query letters that kind of ramble on about the world or the backstory or feel like you have to know all of this before I tell you this, and it's just not really necessary. Um, you want us to walk away knowing exactly what the conflict is, exactly what the stakes are, and have that intrigue and that burning desire to see what happens.
So you kind of a little bit touched on what I was going to ask next. Like when you're reading pages from a new writer who's querying you, what are the kinds of things you're looking for? And you kind of already said intrigue and not too much information. What makes you request pages? Because after you read the query, you get excited. The next step is maybe requesting part of a manuscript, the whole manuscript. What makes you do that?
So, me personally, my process is on Query Tracker, and every agent, by the way, will have different requirements, which can be a little bit overwhelming because you're having to submit different materials in different ways to each one. But I actually require the authors to paste the first 5 pages into the body of the query because after I read the query, I want to see if the writing holds. And that can really tell me a lot. I mean, I can tell in the first 5 pages if I'm going to want to keep reading or not, especially on the strength of the writing itself. So I'll read the query. If it's got a great hook, a really interesting plot, maybe I can tell that the voice is there. Sometimes it's the bio paragraph. They've got a great platform, so it's worth me taking a look. There's got to be something in it that not only hooks me, but it's that through line to the next step. And then I go and I read the first 5 pages because they're already there, and that determines whether I'm going to move on or not. In the first 5 pages, again, something has to keep me there. It's not always going to be the same thing. Like, it's not always going to be plot. Most of the time, it's going to be your point of view character because that's really what a reader connects with first and foremost is they want to be invested in that character's journey and want to read 400 pages of a book with this character. So I would say for me, most of the time, it's connection to the character and the quality of the writing itself that's going to keep me in the pages. But I mean, sometimes, let's say it's a rom-com and you've got like a great meet cute scene with some really fun banter and dialogue. So maybe it's that keeps me in the story. Maybe it's a fantasy and there's some really unique, intricate world building in the first 5 pages. It just has to be something that shows there's a promise of more to come. And if there's nothing in that first 5 pages that does that, then I can't really trust that it's going to get any better, if that makes sense. And agents also just really don't have the time, unfortunately. I would love to be able to give a better review of every single manuscript that comes across my desk, but I just can't. I opened to queries for, I think, like 2 weeks, and I had 1,000 queries in just 2 weeks. So our process has to be relatively quick.
So I hear you saying there has to be something unique that stands out for you to grab it. And it could be a variety of things, actually. And you've mentioned if it's not that, you pass on the project. Is there anything else that makes you just pass on the project, even if the writing's good? Or is it always, it just doesn't have a thing, whatever that thing might be, whether it's voice, whether it's clever dialogue? Does my question make sense?
Yes, it does. Usually it's because it doesn't have a thing. There's nothing holding me in the story. I don't care enough. And I don't mean that harshly, but we say care in terms of that reader character connection and also the connection with the story itself. Like I have to care on that deep level about the character or the story or whatever's happening to want to move forward and continue investing my time. I think also it comes down to an X factor, if you will, because there are a lot of good manuscripts out there. I would say that the majority of the manuscripts that I review fall into that middle category. Like we can easily spot the ones that are just absolutely not ready, right? Like have red flags all over the first 5 pages. Those are kind of easy no's. And then, we can very quickly spot winners. Well, maybe not quickly, but it's a little easier. But I think the majority of writers are in the middle where there's nothing necessarily wrong with the manuscript, but it just doesn't have that something extra that's going to make it competitive in such a crowded space.
And going back to the crowded space piece, when you said, you opened up for 2 weeks, you had 1,000 queries. Is part of that AI? And I asked just simply because I've heard that rumor. I also had a former student send me a manuscript from a friend, and I it took me a couple paragraphs in that chapter, and I was like, "This is ChatGPT." I live in schools, so I see it all the time. Are you seeing an influx based on AI, or do we just have a lot of people interested in writing with fewer agents to
I
query?
think we have a lot of people interested in writing personally. I mean, from the query letter, I find it very hard to tell it's written using AI. I mean, sometimes you can, but like, I don't like to assume because I think that, and this is kind of a broader conversation, but we're in a time right now where authors are being attacked left and right for potentially, being suspected of using AI, even if they're not. And I think that that's kind of a dangerous, slippery slope to get into. And so I typically want to assume that they haven't used it. And then in my contract, it does say that I acknowledge that I have not used generative AI to write this book. I think in a full manuscript, it would be much easier to tell, but just from the query letter, I think it's a little bit more difficult.
I can see that. I was actually thinking of chapters, but you're right. The query letter, there's a lot of similarities among them, so it might be more difficult. It's so standard. So what makes you fall in love with a manuscript? You've got 1,000 flooding your inbox.
Well, it's that connection with the character, number one. That's a big one for me. If I'm automatically on that character's side, wanting to root for them, wanting to know, what happens next. I want to take this journey with them. Usually that comes down to the voice and the point of view. Voice is a really hard one to tackle because it's very like unique and inherent to the writer's style and process. It's kind of hard to teach someone how to improve voice or how to write a certain voice, if that makes sense. But typically with the characters, it's going to be their perspective. Are they viewing the story through a really unique lens? Does the voice have something special that is new and fresh that I haven't seen before? But it's not always that. Sometimes I fall in love with the dialogue. Sometimes I fall in love with, the really cool, interesting story concept. Yeah.
So it could
Writing.
be a variety. Again, a variety of things. You could,
Yeah, it could be a variety of things for sure.
yeah. So then the lucky writer gets an offer of representation from you. You're representing him or her, and what happens next behind the scenes? I mean, I know some of the tricky things, but there's a whole lot of stuff.
There's a lot that goes into it. My first, I guess, order of business would be to tackle some revisions if I have revision notes for the author. This is done completely free as part of my job as the agent. If an agent ever tries to charge you for revisions, that's a red flag. And this is just mostly because I have this editorial background, and so I can't help but have notes. When I sign something, I usually say, and let's tweak this, or, we can do this to improve it because I want it to have the best chance of success. Um, but those revisions are typically going to be minimal at the agent stage. An agent really isn't there to edit your manuscript. A lot of agents won't do editorial notes at all. So don't like assume that that's going to be part of the process. And for me personally, even with the editing background, I don't take anything on that requires like a heavy edit or large structural changes or anything like that. So we would do that and we would work on strengthening it until it's ready. And then in the meantime, I would be working on a pitch and a pitch list, which means that I'm essentially writing a query letter to pitch to editors, personalizing it for the editor's tastes and interests, just like you guys do with a query letter. And I'm going to develop a pitch list to know where to send it to, which takes a lot of research and a lot of time.
Yeah, and you brought up earlier when an author is looking to query agents, that also is requiring some research. You really want to find agents that are interested in your genre, your style, et cetera. And here again, you're doing more research to find the editor that's going to be a good match.
And it's the same kind of research, really. I mean, it's not just the publishing houses and imprints that take that particular type of story, but looking at the editors and what they're looking for. Some I already have personal relationships with, so I know a story would be a perfect fit for that particular editor, but some are new, and I will have to go on that manuscript wish list website or pub market and really dig into what they like, look at their deals that they've done in the past and books that they've worked on. Maybe I even follow them on social media. Oh, that's another thing I was going to say. You had asked at what point should you start worrying about or thinking about an agent? If you're at the early stages, but you can still follow agents on social media, that can be really helpful, especially agents who are posting things that like help you. There's a lot of good ones out there. I don't post all that much just because I don't really have the time at this point, but there are a handful of ones. And so you can start at least following some of like your favorite agents just to get a sense of what they're looking for.
So how long does it typically take? Could you even answer that question? So,
I
I've
know
got the
it.
agent, and then when does it hit shelves?
Oh gosh. So first of all, not every manuscript that is signed by an agent is going to sell. I think that's a common misconception. A lot of authors think as soon as I get an agent, it's a done deal, and it's really not the case. It still has to go through that selective process. And you never know. I mean, a lot of it comes down to luck and timing sometimes. I have seen amazing manuscripts not get through for like random reasons. I've seen manuscripts make it to acquisitions, but then they can't get the whole team behind it. So we're told no. Um, so yeah, so it doesn't necessarily guarantee that it's going to come out on the shelf. But if it is purchased, I would say it it varies, but probably 12 to 18 months from the time of signing with the publisher. Yeah, that's about right, I think between 12 and 18 months. 12 months would be really fast. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's
And
like you
then in
said.
terms of how long does it take on submission, what was that?
Oh, I was just going to go into that. It could be you get lucky and you're signed in 3 days, or it could take 3 months or 8 months or a year for to find the right editor, depending.
I had my very first book I ever sold in 3 days. It was crazy. It was like I submitted it on a Thursday, and on Monday, the editor was emailing saying she taking it to acquisitions, but that's super rare. It's usually not that fast. And then I had one that was on submission for 8 months. I had kind of written it off. I thought if it hasn't sold by now, it's probably not going to. Agents do get ghosted by editors. It's not, I don't say that to criticize them. They have a lot on their plates. I mean, in addition to reviewing submissions and acquiring manuscripts, they have to edit for their authors and they have a lot. So that's not a judgment. It just happens. And that's kind of what I assumed had happened. And then I think it was around the 8 month mark, we got two offers for this book. So publishing is just very like fickle and not always consistent. So that's a tough answer. I think Generally speaking, if it hasn't sold, if we haven't seen any offers between like 3 and 6 months, it's probably not going to happen just because I think that when an editor is highly interested in a project, they get to it right away. At least that's been my experience.
You said publishing is fickle, and I've said publishing is a slog, but it is beautiful and it is fun, but it is those things as well. So, what makes a good author agent relationship?
I think communication is probably the most important thing. Just being very transparent about where we're at in the process, even if it's not good news. Like, even if I have to tell a client, hey, I just don't think the manuscript is ready, or I don't think it's going to sell, or we've tried, a huge list and I've gone out very widely and I don't think it's going to happen. I mean, I just always want to be very transparent with my authors so that they know where they stand. I think too, just that mutual respect, especially understanding that an agent does work for free until the book sells, and that's not a guarantee to happen. So just not like overloading them with, daily questions or asking for updates constantly, or you know what I'm saying? Just like kind of being aware of the fact that your agent has probably 30 of you. I think that's about the average, at least for a smaller agency, that would be the average, but some have twice that number, especially if they've been in the business for a long time. And, agents sort of have to prioritize in a sense, like they have to prioritize their clients who have contracts that are like coming up for recontracting with their publisher or have another synopsis, to pitch on spec to their publisher. Like there's kind of a system, if you will. But I think that that serves authors well because when it's your turn, you want your agent to prioritize you when you're at that stage. So that was kind of like a ranty answer to what what makes a good author agent relationship, but yeah, I would say communication, transparency, and just that mutual respect.
The whole business requires a great deal of patience. So, I think that just being on the
Mm.
author end, like you said, having the patience and recognizing your turn's coming, it's just not right now. And you're not going to get a daily update because the author's not going to get a daily update because the agent's not going to get a daily update and they're doing other things. They've got a lot of things on their plate. What trends are you seeing in publishing right now? Anything of interest that authors would be interested in hearing about?
Romantasy is still hot, fantasy romance. There's been speculation that it's gonna start to fizzle out, but I really don't think that it will. It's a mashup of two long-standing genres, so I don't think it's going anywhere. Um, I will say that especially in romance, but really this is across the board. Think thriller, women's fiction, historical fiction. I'm seeing a lot of desire from editors and publishers for a project that can hook readers in one sentence. So, like, the premise, the central conflict can be summarized in like 1 to 2 sentences because it's actually very expensive and difficult to acquire readers for a debut author. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of money to put behind a debut because you're trying to convince a reader to spend money on a author that doesn't have a track record that they've never heard of. And so to make it easier to do that, if you have a hooky concept, that can really help as well. So I've seen that. Horror is definitely on the rise, if not already climbing to the top, from what I'm hearing, and horror romance too. That's a big one. And then I think there are certain genres that are just kind of always selling, like romance is still the number one selling genre. Um, I think not women's fiction, we don't call it women's fiction anymore. I think that's shifting to just upmarket fiction, is what I'm hearing. But there's always a market for that, for book club fiction. There's always a market for thriller, although it's getting harder because there are so many books in that space. It is harder, as at least I feel it's hard as an agent to find something that's like completely new and fresh that's going to make a big splash in the space.
So you've mentioned a lot of genres, some of the trends in genre that would probably, if you're writing in that space, then that might improve their chances of getting representation. Is there anything else that a writer can do to improve their chance of getting an agent besides just choosing or by happenstance having a manuscript in their drawer that's ready, a romantasy one right here, ready to go?
Um, Always improving your writing. I mean, really, that's what it comes down to. You can have the best story concept and a really unique hook, but if the writing isn't on par with what is selling, like competitive with what is on the shelves, it's probably not going to get through. So I would say that's the number one thing in addition to the hook that I was talking about. And then, building your platform doesn't hurt. I think platform can look like a lot of different things. Platform can look like you attend regular annual writers conferences and you're a member of this writing organization or that writing organization, or you've taken workshops and classes. I mean, anything that you can do to show that you take yourself seriously as an author, I think is very helpful.
Good. Well, I have one more question for you. I'm going to ask, and then I'll open it up to everyone here. What are you looking for in a manuscript right now?
I would love to find a really good romance that's not necessarily romantasy because I'm pretty full. I mean, I'll still consider them because that's kind of the space that I've been working in, but I am pretty heavy on that on my list, but I don't have any like sports romance or, cute small town series or things like that. So I would love to find something like that. Also high on my list would be a psychological thriller, something like Ruth Ware, Lucy Foley, Alice Feeney. Um, those are hard to come by, and I have yet to find one, and I've been looking for a while. So I would love to find something like that.
All of those would be fun to write. Um, so I know some people are going to stick around and ask some questions before anyone leaves. I do want to say that next week, next Wednesday's Zoom session is What Fell from the Sky, and we're going to be talking about Tacoma headlines and how to turn those into historical fiction. I don't think. Do you ever do historical fiction? I didn't
Not
know.
not often. No, I'm just not like immersed in the space
Yeah.
so well, and I don't read like voraciously in that space. So again, I'm open if something were to come along that I just went nuts over, but typically no.
Yeah. We actually have the person who's leading that session here. I didn't even realize because I wasn't looking.
Oh,
So
how
that's
funny.
exciting. She's here. So think about that. And then also this Saturday we have in person. There she is. In person we have something called Writing Your Story, and that's taking place. So if you hop on Luma, there's lots of different classes and courses in person and on Zoom. But now I want to open up the floor for everyone to ask Katie any questions that you have about agenting, manuscripts, the publishing process. I see a question in the chat. Would any of the advice you have shared here be different for an author? Well, then I got to open it all the way up. For an author who's already self-published a few books and might be interested in finding an agent for a future book.
Not Not vastly different if you're talking about a fresh manuscript. If you're talking about trying to get your backlist picked up, then yes. But if you're talking about a fresh manuscript, I would say that it depends on the success of your self-published books. If you've done really, really well in that space, you might actually want to lead with your bio in the query letter. If you're saying something like, my, small town romance series has sold over 100,000 copies in the last year. Like, that's impressive. We want to know that right away. So you might put that in your hook. Um, but typically, it's not going to change like the requirements of what I just said. Like, you still have to have a really strong manuscript with quality writing, hooked in the first 5 pages, all those things.
Thank you. I had asked that. I was actually wondering if it would be a detriment to be already self-published, or if the manuscript was strong, if you had the track record and the bio, if it wouldn't be.
I wouldn't say it's a detriment because there's always pen names, if I'm being honest.
Yeah,
I mean, if
I
if
have one.
like, okay, if you felt like your self-published series just didn't, or books didn't do as well as you wanted them to, and you don't want your author name for a fresh book connected with it, then yeah, you could just use a pen name and take care of that.
Thank you. Noah, you are next.
Hi there. I'm Noah. I'm also an aspiring author. I write in epic fantasy, particularly, but I'm wondering when it comes to querying and when we're looking at comp titles that we're adding, do they all need to be books? Recently, I was at a convention. There were authors that were selling their books. They were using like video game meets this, or like TV show plus TV show. This is that book, and I'm wondering. While that was awesome for, I did end up buying one of those books, or actually two of those books. Uh, does that work for a query letter, or do they need to be comparable book titles that are recent?
It does work for a query letter, especially if you're showing like an overall vibe kind of the story, or like a tone, if that makes sense. I so comps can serve different purposes. If your comps are like, it's for fans of Ruth Ware, Lucy Foley, Alice Feeney. That's showing audience, and that's going to show like where your book fits on the shelves and what audience is going to buy it. If you're using your comps to express like the plot, you might say something like, I pitched a book once that was Squid Game Goes to Vegas. That would be more of like the vibe, I think, maybe not so much the plot, but the vibe. When White Lotus was really popular, we saw a lot of White Lotus mashups. I've seen, gosh, what else have I seen in the TV world? Nothing comes to mind right now. Oh, Severance. I've seen a lot of this meets Severance. So that's kind of like concept feel. And then if you're going to be really specific with your comps, which I personally like, you can say it's the X of this meets the Y of this. So like it's the fast-paced plot of this book with the, emotionality of this TV show, or whatever it is that fits for you. My one piece of advice is I typically recommend you at least include one book in there. You can have more than two comps. I wouldn't go any more than three, but if you're using two movie comps for like the concept or the vibe, then maybe you include like an author or another book for audience, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you.
I've actually also seen authors comp to albums, like Taylor Swift's Reputation. I always thought that was kind of interesting.
That's clever.
The
Mhm.
the
Scotty.
just one more. Like the
Sorry, Noah.
most unique one that I saw was at this was Agatha Christie runs a homebrew D&D game was their comp title. I'm like, wow, that's incredible.
But that tells you exactly what the
Yeah.
concept of that book is and what the vibe's going to be.
I love it. Scotty.
Hi, thanks. And I really appreciate Noah's questions. Those were a lot of my questions too, because I have questions about comps as well. And I'm so sorry, the lighting is terrible. Um, I keep hearing that when you query, you want to have comps that are within the last 5 years. But a lot of the work that I'm doing right now is post-apocalyptic fiction, which I know is not super trendy right now. And
It
certainly would
actually is really trendy right now.
really, I keep hearing it's not, so that's really good. That's really good
So it is
news.
definitely on the rise, I would say.
Okay, good. What if you're writing post-apocalyptic fiction and the books that you feel are most, I guess, sort of evocative, are, some of the classics that were written a really long time ago? Do you stick with the for fans of or in the tradition of, and then you want to have something that's maybe a little bit more contemporary? Would that be the right mix?
Tell me what your comps are.
Um, a little bit of Station 11, a little bit of The Earth Abides, a little bit of a kind of obscure book called The Children of Dust, which is actually a YA novel. Um, so I don't know how to fit all that in, and I don't know how to make that kind of all work together. So again, I really appreciate the answers you've already given to Noah.
Station
But
11 is a TV show, right?
sorry,
Station 11 is a TV show.
and was also a novel by Emily.
Was.
Yeah.
I would say generally we like to have comps that are within the last 3 to 5 years because it's showing that that your book is going to be relevant today. But if you're going to use an old comp title, that can work depending on how you're like mashing it up. One example I can give is I recently signed a romantasy that is Pride and Prejudice meets The Witcher. So that's a very like fitting concept, but it has a newer comp title mixed with an older comp title.
Gotcha.
Or sometimes I've seen like if Jane Eyre was written by this person, or if Jane Austen wrote a book about zombies, or something to that effect. So that's what I would recommend is if you're going to use a really old one, mix
Mhm.
it up with something fresh because you're creating that concept.
Okay, that's good to hear that that could work. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Does anyone else have any questions for Katie tonight?
I have another one if nobody else
Sure.
does. Often in science fiction, post-apocalyptic series tend to be pretty popular. If you've written the first of something and it stands alone as its own story, but you know there's going to be others, you know you have several other ideas, is it better to query when you've got a hearty second draft of the next one? Is it best to wait until you've finished all three? Or is it better to just, if you've got something and you know that it works and it's been through beta readers, to just kind of go for it?
I
What
think
would
you
an agent prefer to hear from someone?
I mean, I think you should go for it because publishing is so slow and takes so long. You don't want to have to wait until you're into the second or the third book to start trying to sell the first one. I mean, if you think about that time to market, let's say the first book sells, but it's not going to come out on the shelves for 18 months. There's your 18 months to work on book two. Um, it sounds like you might have a standalone with series potential, in which case I would prefer to at least have an idea of where the series is going. So if you have book two, a synopsis, or even like a half-page story concept, just to, I think that would be very helpful as well, because that's a question that the agents are going to get asked by the editors. What's next? What do they have coming down the pipeline?
Great. Thank you very much.
Noah.
This is quick. Could you mention the resources or it was like Query Tracker and something just for finding that again?
I can put it in the
Yeah, that
chat
would be
here.
great. I'm writing them down.
Net. And then I believe manuscript wish list. I can't remember if it's, do you remember, Erica? Is it MSWL or is it all spelled out?
I think it's the acronym. I'm looking right now.
I'm gonna put the title of it because you can probably just Google it.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
It
And
it it appears that it is the whole manuscriptwishlist.com and then hashtag MSWL if you're looking on other socials.
okay. Publishers Marketplace can also be a good one, but you do have to have a subscription. It's $25 a month, I believe. But I mean, you could just pay for 1 month and then do your research and cancel it. But that's where all the deals are posted, so you can get a feel for editors and agents, what they're selling, what kind of deals they've done, that sort of thing. And I always recommend cross-referencing with the agent's website because Query Tracker, they tr do a great job and they try to keep everything as current as possible, but really the most updated source of information is going to be on that website or even on their socials.
I had
Megan.
a question. Yeah, a little bit back, you said something about horror romance
Mhm.
having like a moment. I really enjoy things that are like that, but I haven't seen it referenced as like its own little subgenre. What would be some good titles that you would consider in that genre?
I don't really work in that genre, so
Oh,
I'm not
sure.
sure I'd be the best one to help you. But actually, randomly enough, I have this list here that one of my editorial clients was recommending some horror, and she recommended Prettiest Girl in the Grave, Darkly, and Night Film. So I don't know if those help you, but I've got them on my little
No,
notepad.
that's very helpful. Thank you.
Uh, 13 Months Haunted, she also said, and The Wolf King, which I think is actually romantasy. Um, yeah, it's kind of a newly emerging, I would say within the last year space, but basically elements of horror. I think the biggest one from my understanding of it is that feeling of dread. Like fiction is an emotional experience, so each genre kind of has its own emotions that story should evoke. And horror, you know, you're wanting to feel like afraid and dreadful and like edge of your seat and tense and anxious the whole time. So like matching that with a really compelling romance with
Cool.
that. Yeah.
No, it's good to hear that that's like emerging as its own space now.
Mhm.
So thank you.
Yeah.
I have another question.
Sure.
If just to I guess expand on an earlier thought about the getting involved with your community and like building a platform,
Mhm.
when do you think is the right stage for authors who want to start their social media? Typically, what I've heard is it's sooner than you think. It's before the book is ready, but um, is that probably the same time that you're searching for an agent? Is that earlier than that? What is your opinion on that?
I mean, it kind of depends on your relationship with social media, honestly, how much you enjoy it. Some authors love posting, and in that case, I would say start it at any time. I mean, if you're taking yourself seriously as an author, you don't have to wait until the book is published to call yourself an author. you can start an author social media and post things about your writing process or the book that you're writing. I wouldn't give away too much. Um, or the conferences you've attended, and just start trying to kind of build an audience. But if social media is not your thing, I think that's okay too. I mean, really, platform isn't like make or break. It can be very, very helpful because at the acquisition stage, that's when all the team members get pulled in, like sales and marketing and PR and all these players that have to kind of weigh in on, do we think we can make money on this book? And if you have that audience, it just kind of helps them push it through. But really, ultimately, at the end of the day, it's going to be all about the book. So don't get too stressed if you're not a social media person. The other piece of advice I would give about social media is that you don't necessarily want to post that you're going on submission. You can post when you get agented, of course, but like if you post that you're on submission and it's been a year, then that might flag editors who are looking at it that, oh, they've been on submission for a really long time. There must be a reason for it. So just be careful what you're sharing and don't reveal too much.
All right. Any more
Thank you.
questions? When I ask, are there any more questions, I literally count for 5 seconds because in teachery school, we learned that the wait time that's necessary is 5 to 8 seconds. So I'm very good at awkward silences after almost 30 years in the classroom.
That was perfect. I love it.
And it's even more awkward when it's just a black screen, but I also taught on Zoom, so I'm comfortable with just everything.
Excellent.
Yes, thank you guys for all of your questions, all your curiosity, for being here tonight. And Katie, I really, really appreciate your generosity.
Really?
Yeah, you've spent a lot of time doing a lot of neat projects. You've met a lot of people. You've had some crazy stories and and then just some standard experiences. So you're a wealth of knowledge, and sometimes it feels like there's this mysterious thing going on. So anything someone can do to illuminate it and make people feel like, oh, I can do this. I can do this. So I appreciate it a lot.
Absolutely can do it.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you. And I hope everyone has a great night. And again, next Wednesday here, we're going to be talking about how Tacoma's interesting history has created an avenue for historical fiction. And then on Saturday, we have a program for writing your own story. So that should be fun. And that's in Tacoma.
Great. Have fun, everybody. Enjoy the event.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.